This Parliament has been united about the need for ambitious climate targets in the past. In the face of increasing anti-climate rhetoric, I would urge Parliament to remain steadfast in our commitment to climate science and the need for strong climate action.
And the UK Climate Change Committee is clear that the 75% emissions target for 2030 in 5 years' time won't be met till 2036. Now, I want to be clear, we support the principle of legally binding carbon targets, but we urgently need the plan to deliver on them, and we don't have that. And we are in a climate emergency, and we're not just seeing wildfires and flooding in southern Europe and East Asia, we're seeing them in Scotland. This week, SEPA issued water scarcity warnings across key parts of Scotland, while at the same time Storm Amy saw communities cut off from electricity and suffering from flooding. So we're going to get more and more extreme weather hitting communities and businesses, so we urgently need action and a plan from the Scottish Government. More and more extreme weather hitting communities and businesses, so we urgently need action and a plan from the Scottish Government. An acceleration in emission reductions, investment in adaptation to protect communities and businesses, and a focus on the highest emissions targeting mitigation and adaptation, our homes and buildings, transport, land and industry.
Start by reflecting on where we are in this journey. We've already used up nearly half the time from the first Climate Act through to the 2045 target. And in that time, we've fallen behind schedule with a series of missed targets. Now, the only rational response to falling behind schedule is to speed up, yet some people seem determined to advocate the very opposite. The easy bit has been done already. From here on, it gets harder, and we've long known that that was going to be the case. It's not just technically harder, it's politically harder too. This is shown by the way that the political parties of the increasingly extreme right are breaking the consensus and dropping support for any credible climate policy. But it's also shown by the lack of urgency that we're seeing from the SNP. 4 years ago, the Greens agreed to join the government, and a large part of our motivation in doing so was to restore that urgency, especially in 3 key areas that haven't seen enough progress. Cutting road traffic, something that the Scottish Government knows needs to happen, both to address climate change and to cut local air pollution. Pressing ahead with a credible programme on clean heating, an area where the policy experts had previously been held back by the politicians, despite the unarguable need to decarbonise by ditching fossil fuel heating. And finally, on land use, where a change in the nature of subsidy and support offers real opportunities for both reduced emissions and strong rural economies meeting the need for healthier diets. But now, on all 3 of these key issues, far from accelerating action to make up for lost ground, the SNP is slowing down. A 20% target to cut car traffic has been dropped, not revised as the government originally announced, as there has been no replacement for that target. I'm afraid I don't have time with 4 minutes. The Heat in Buildings bill, already wildly overdue, now has only a few months left to pass through Parliament, and that confirms to me the suspicion that the government have absolutely filleted it of any serious delivery mechanisms. Presiding Officer, the Scottish policy landscape, including on climate, is littered with targets that were introduced with no mechanism to deliver.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. On our current trajectory, the planet is heading for life-threatening temperature increases of 2.6 to 3.1 degrees by the end of this century. Climate breakdown is already upon us, and my constituents in the North East are experiencing it in real time. Prolonged drought, record wildfires, violent storms. The damage and destruction only seems to increase year on year. Yet it is in this context that the Scottish Government chose to pull its Heat and Buildings bill, chose to scrap its car kilometre reduction target, and chose to ditch its legally binding greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 target. Why on earth, and at a time like this? not because it had to, not because it couldn't be done, but because of its own inaction year after year after year for 18 long years. That's why we're debating the setting of carbon budgets today. But with scant detail or much of a plan from the SNP, it will be cold comfort to those on the sharp end of climate change in my region. Presiding Officer, we know that domestic and commercial energy use, including heating, accounts for 20% of Scotland's emissions. Indeed, the UK spends more money on wasted domestic heating than any other country in Western Europe. Inefficient boilers, combined with poorly insulated walls and roofs, cost us a fortune in energy bills. Meanwhile, some rogue operators are going around cashing in by flogging inappropriate insulating so-called solutions which cause havoc in old buildings, leading to damp and mould and costly repairs. But there is another way. A national retrofit plan to reduce our reliance on imported gas and create thousands of well-paid, unionised jobs in construction, in manufacturing and in fitting. Builders, plumbers, joiners, all trained and deployed here in Scotland. And that's not all. The second largest emitting sector, with almost 20% of Scotland's emissions, is agriculture. Food production is absolutely essential to our nation and to my region, but it doesn't have to cost the earth. It's possible to balance the land needs of crops, livestock and wildlife and reap the benefits of them all by promoting climate and nature-friendly farming, by breaking up land monopolies and by supporting smallholdings, tenant farms and crofts. There can be a farming revolution where farming enhances nature and we're all the better off for it. But there's yet still more that we can do. The nationalisation of ScotRail in 2022 was our chance to make a real difference for Scotland's energy transition. But the SNP government are missing this opportunity, throwing away a chance to decarbonise transport while creating a reliable, affordable public service. Labour want a clean, I'm afraid I don't have time. Labour want a clean, green, electrified rail network that drives down emissions and gets people out of traffic, out of pollution and into work. The Scottish Government can and must do more to encourage a society-wide modal shift from road to rail, both for passengers and freight.
Of sequencing. The 2024 Act, which was passed with cross-party support, outlines the sequence of events that result in a final climate change plan. Within this, the deadline to lay a draft climate change plan in Parliament is 2 months after the carbon budget regulations come into force. This is set in statute. I have always been clear this is the order in which the regulations in the plan would be developed. In fact, if you let me finish this point, Ms Villalba, no other UK nation is compelled to produce a climate change plan in draft at the same time that they lay their regulations associated with carbon budgets. And I'll take Mercedes Villalba.
Mercedes Villalba.
Thank you. Thank the Cabinet Secretary for taking the intervention. I just wanted to ask if it's the government's position that work should always be left until the final deadline, and it is possible to bring things forward ahead of time.
Cabinet Secretary.
Greatest of respect. The work required to put a climate change plan in draft takes months. It takes months because you have to adjust maybe some of your proposals based on advice you get from the Climate Change Committee. You need to speak to your Cabinet colleagues about what is possible within their portfolio, which I have done, and I am very grateful to them for their pragmatic approach and for the suggestions that they have brought forward. Now, I understand and I agree with the urgency felt by most across the chamber on tackling the climate emergency. I'm afraid I really can't reconcile that sentiment with the prospect that members may sit in their hands and abstain on these regulations today. Yeah. And I did hope that my intelligence and my thoughts about where people might go with the vote were wrong, and that they would work with me in supporting these regulations based on the advice of the Committee for Climate Change. The Committee for Climate Change, at which some members asked me to accept their advice without any actually, they wanted me to be compelled by that advice, no matter what it was, even well before we started to work on a climate change plan. I just can't reconcile that. But listen, it's not my job to tell people what's politically expedient to do. What I want to do, Mr Whittle, I want to address some of the comments that people have made in the debate. Douglas Lumsden may be mystified, but the law is very clear in the process. I've set out the law on the process. No other UK nation has to bring a climate change plan and draft at the same time as these regulations. The timing has been set out to the committee alongside the carbon budgets. It is a shame that others want to be associated with the rhetoric of Douglas Lumsden. I know that they have very different policy messages, but if they vote alongside them, then I find that quite disappointing, to be honest. Patrick Harvey says a plan must match the carbon budget. The Committee for Climate Change is very clear to me and to others that they do not dictate the policies that we would use. That is up to Parliament and governments to decide. As I said to Willie Rennie, the Climate Change Plan will put forward the plan that matches the targets. At Parliament, I'm getting the sense that Parliament is not going to vote down the targets, but most of Parliament look like they are abstaining. I find that, again, very disappointing. Michael Matheson rightly pointed out that the importance of stability and staying the course on their climate ambition. Now, I was told very recently by a company that's about to base themselves in Glasgow, Hitachi, that the reason why they have chosen Glasgow as their location in the UK for the UK headquarters is because Scotland is staying the course on their climate ambition. Glasgow has set their ambition for a net zero city by 2030 and Scotland has set their ambition by 2045. That's what brings in investment. In a very uncertain world, where you can provide policy stability and ambition, it's incumbent on you to do so. I'll take Patrick Harvey.
Patrick Harvey.
To the member for giving way, and perhaps this is one reason why we're not seeing the investment in the clean heat sector that we could be seeing if government was giving crystal clarity. Does the Cabinet Secretary accept that the criticisms that have been made this evening are not only about process, they are also about substance, because the very areas where the new climate plan needs to accelerate action are the areas where the SNP has been slowing down, watering down, diluting and delaying?
Cabinet Secretary.
But this is about process. The process is that we vote on the carbon budgets. We have set out our carbon budgets. We have taken on the recommendation on the level of those carbon budgets and put it before Parliament to vote on today. That will set and train us delivering the draft climate change plan. Now, I have said that it is my aim to give that to Parliament and the committee by the end of October. Obviously, it's up to the Bureau about when that happens. But I said time and time again that I wanted to give Parliament the most amount of time for scrutiny on the draft climate change plan. And it is a draft climate change plan which can be altered and changed before we publish the final climate change plan, which I have set out a commitment to do by the end of this Parliament.